Hello, I just wanted to go through a few things which have been occurring to me and which kind of on my mind in terms of the elements work with the circle of elemental archetypes. Uh, as a preamble, I just wanted to recap what Tamo and his colleagues, both in the 1960s and among the Green Monks, thought of as kind of a developmental pattern. And that is that during childhood, our consciousness tends to be colored by a particular combination of two elemental energies, characterized by an archetype. And that this colors childhood for you, this colors your experience, this colors how you kind of manifest in a sense. It, you're probably not aware of it because there isn't normally the sort of the acute self-consciousness that gives that sort of like awareness of like I'm this and not that in quite that way. Now this doesn't mean that you are that archetype. You're never nobody is an archetype, but a child isn't an archetype either. It also doesn't mean that you only have access to those two elemental energies, or what we characterize as those elemental energies. Again, that's not so. But these elemental energies characterize you in a significant way. These two elemental energies in a significant way, and they sort of like they color things in a sort of undifferentiated way because you're not really conscious of them, but they just are. It's just how the world is, how you are, etc., etc. Yeah. So that comes in there. At adolescence, there's a different sorts of development tends to take place in that the person starts to develop a much more self-conscious sense of what they are and also of what they can become. It's a natural movement, really, in general, but it's a movement towards making a self, in a sense. It's something that you just do as you move out of childhood, and it's distinguished from childhood, and it needs to be distinguished from childhood for it to move forward in a sense. And Tamo and his colleagues thought that this phase and that this time and this period would be characterized by the other two elemental energies which weren't in the childhood state. And so you get this sort of switch over or this overlay, yeah. And the first two elemental energies of childhood and their associated archetype, yeah, they kind of sink into relative subconsciousness or unconsciousness, but it's relative, yeah. It's probably more with some of them than others, but they just kind of like shift into the background and they become more unconscious compared to what is developing and what is being worked on in a sense. Again, just as you were not simply the archetype or the energies of that childhood archetype, so as you move into adolescence, those energies don't disappear and that archetype isn't simply absent, yeah. Everything is still there, yeah. And you could also ask about what else is there during childhood, of course, but this is this is the pattern that that Tamo envisaged, yeah. So you end up with essentially almost like two layers, if you like, yeah, of archetypal energy, and it's an interesting thing. It doesn't just end there, of course. It continues on because life is dynamic. It's always changing, and you're always growing, or you can be always growing. Yeah, and so you find that say some of those during your lifetime, some of those energies which are sort of like seem to be abundant during the adult phase, maybe need to be dialed back, and some of the energies of the childhood archetype, yeah, that have become the most unconscious, maybe need to be refound. And in that way, you start to get through to a more fulfilled, more rounded, and just a more fulfilled pattern and way of living for you as an individual. Yeah. Now, what's interesting here, just using now, my preamble, yeah, but just to use the example of me from what I could see from what I've talking with like a former green monk, and also thinking over things as well. It seems that my childhood state was basically earth and fire, and the one I developed subsequently, and which has remained with me throughout life in various ways, was water and air. So, in the ways that I characterize those, the archetypes associated with them, that would be the hearth priestess during childhood, and it would be the nymph during adulthood. Now, a while ago, we had all sorts of discussions about the triads, which, and by triads we mean the combination of an archetype with the two quadrant archetypes opposite it, which affirm it. So it forms an equilateral triangle, which consists of, and always consists of, one cardinal, one open state, and one fixed state or closed state. Yeah. And a while ago, I did a video just positing that I really felt that one of the archetypes as a representative of something tended to be probably very, very significant for you above the others, yeah? And I felt that was probably so. And I still think that is very significant. In fact, even more so do I now think that that's significant. There is one of the cardinals is really key to you, I think. And we've talked quite a lot about the triads and how they seem to operate, and even talking about almost like triad tribes, to say that maybe these are these states, and if you could even represent these states as people, they'd be the people that you really kind of go on with, in a sense. It's an interesting way of thinking of it. But in any case, looking at this, and over time, I'd say that the cardinal that is probably that I've come to feel is really the most key for me is the Mother Nature cardinal. I wondered about Enchantress for quite a while, but I think it's actually the Mother Nature cardinal, and the Mother Nature triad also. So those all things fit together, and the interesting thing there is to see it's almost like another perspective on the pattern, because if you look at my inherent pattern, or my type, as Temo would have put it, though it's not really a typing system, it's a way of trying to understand the diversity of peoples and their functioning. Yeah. My childhood archetype was an earth first archetype, hearth priestess, and what I seem to and where a particular kind of power, for want of a better word, or capacity, or something that's really, really important to me, is really held in Mother Nature, the Mother Nature archetype. That is my ground, in a sense. It's tremendously important for my healing. It's tremendously important for me being able to simply be myself in that way, and being able to function and finding the guidance system for me. And it will be different for different people, yeah, but it really is tremendously important. And it's interesting because, of course, that is the nearest cardinal to the hearth priestess, which is my childhood archetype. Yeah. Now, the the adolescent archetype, if you want to put it that way, or the later archetype, which is the nymph. In my case, it's directly opposite it. Yeah, it could have been the patriarch as well, according to Tamo's scheme, but it's really much more likely to be the nymph in my case. Yeah, and so the nymph is over the other side, and the next one to that is the enchantress, which I thought of as initially, which I of course I initially thought of that that would be where I belonged, but actually it's more back in that first undifferentiated childhood state of the hearth priestess, and so it goes to Mother Nature. That's how it seems to be anyway. Similarly, now we talked about the triads and triad tribes. In that case, my triad tribe would be Mother Nature, Patriarch, and Fool. And well, the patriarch. The patriarch becomes the archetype in full in Tamo's scheme, with my particular setup of elements. Yeah, that's the archetype that I would find fulfillment through, and in fact, the patriarch, in terms of like understanding things like philosophy, ethics, clarity of thought, principles, values. That's absolutely. I've come to so much appreciate that and really find it essential for me. Yeah, so that's another important thing. The fool again has been a very very important state for me. Really, a very important world for me. Really important. So I see the triad pattern as kind of pretty much holding. I think, in my case, it seems pretty good, and I think it's a very very interesting one. It's very interesting as another way to look at things. Particularly in combination with the sense of what a person's inherent pattern is in terms of in terms of the elements active in childhood and the elements that then become active in the formation of a self-conscious identity. So that's probably about as much as I wanted to say on the video. I do think it's a really interesting subject, and I really it has so much to it. But like I was saying, in my case, Mother Nature is a really key archetype for me. It's a really key archetype, and without it, there's certain parts of myself that I wouldn't be able to understand really, or find the answers to. So I think this stuff has a lot of very important things in it. Anyway, speak to you soon.